Hello, it's Scott Manley here, and this is episode 31 of the Reusable Space Program. We have our Prometheus spacecraft now on an escape trajectory heading towards Moho. It is going to have a tall order getting there, but we set up a mid-course course correction, that makes sense, to adjust our trajectory, make sure we get in close enough to the planet. Meanwhile, we return to our Sleipnir, which is in orbit around Minmus, and it's been spending its time refueling in a renegade style way, but now I think we got to stow our probes and get ready for a return, or for our escape towards Jool and the continuation of our renegade mission to other planets. So yeah, this is the view from the mining rig, which is going to fly over the top of is going to have to fly over and dock this space probe back onto the side of it. And you see I get things confused a little here and turned upside down and not good. You see, we need the probes stuck on the side because that's where they're balanced. We could try hanging them off the middle, but it would just be a tall order making this thing steer straight if we had anything that was off balanced. So yeah, I guess we should probably bring in the landing gear. That would be a nice thing to do, but we'll do that as we come over the side. Of course, this is a post commentary because this thing takes so darn long. It's the frame rate, as you can see, is a yellow code in the top left. When the timer goes yellow, it's slower than usual, and when it goes red, it's running really darn slow. So I just have to make do and survive, I guess. But we gotta bring the rover down. So we have 4 rovers, we have 2 balloon-based spacecraft, we have this mining lander, and so the plans are that the 2 balloon-based spacecraft will go to Jool and to Lathe. The one that goes to Lathe will carry with it a rover. Meanwhile, the lander will drop rovers onto the surfaces of Val, Bop, and Paul. And so that will be our complete complement of exploration. The only place we can't land is Tylo. We don't have a spacecraft here with enough thrust. Well, specifically thrust to weight ratio. We have the Delta V, but it has real issues getting off of Tylo. Even though it's a vacuum, doing a single stage lander onto Tylo does require quite an effort. I did demonstrate one which used Kerbal's hanging off of ladders, so we could probably do that better these days if I ever upgrade my reusable space program to version 0.20. Of course, 0.21 is apparently almost upon us, according to the devs, but we have been warned that that upgrading to 0.21 will kill your save file, so perhaps I need to make a little tutorial beforehand to back up your old 0.20 saves, so that they can still be used, especially for people on Steam who will be forced to upgrade. But anyway, we're bringing this in with as delicately as possible, and that's kind of really hard because it just doesn't want to dock well. There's a bit of bumping, and hopefully we don't crush that. Now, I did actually have serious problem undocking here. It wasn't going to undock, so what I ended up having to do was I could undock the lower rover and then fly back, undock everything, and it actually worked that time. So I fixed that and managed to get myself away. Unfortunately, I forgot to record that, and in fact, a lot of the interesting stuff completely failed to get recorded during this thing, and that's very disappointing considering the amount of work it took. Anyway, we've got to stick this thing back on the rear of this. This is going to be our drive section. If you remember, the drive section, when we docked it, caused uncontrollable oscillations leading to the damage of the vehicle and the loss of a couple of dedicated solar panels. Yes, you see, we didn't actually record that because I was an idiot. So we still have some time until our Jool encounter, but what I'm going to do is send this into we need to send this into an orbit where it's going to pass close to the planet Kerbin. However, that means that we need to wait until Minmus is in the correct place. So I switch to this spacecraft and watch it fly off. For some reason, the game has decided that it's not called Prometheus, it's called Olympus spacecraft. I should probably fix that at some point. But yes, it's now off on its journey towards Moho for reals. They're committed, there's almost no going back. Meanwhile, I adjust my orbit here, so I bring it down close, and the idea we're going to use this, by bringing this down close, although we want to go out, by bringing it close, it means that we're going to be able to use some of our energy more efficiently due to the magic of the O-Birth effect, which you've heard a million times. But yeah, if you're out at Minmus and you want to then leave for another planet, do this low-pass trajectory and then burn. The only trick is you have to make sure you're pointing the right way. Anyway, so we are all fueled up, as you can see. And this spacecraft is turning extremely slowly. I'm not using mechanical jeb to fly this thing because it does not want to hold still particularly well. Mech jeb does have a nasty habit of shaking spacecraft apart. I hope that the new ASAS system that C7 has developed will fix that. But who knows? Anyway, once you do get it going, if you just leave it, the vibrations will dampen down. That's why Mech Jeb tends to do it, because it wants to keep correcting and keep correcting. Therefore, it just makes things worse and worse until your spacecraft snaps into tiny pieces. Whereas I can push the button, hold it down, then let it go and let the vibrations settle. And that'll leave me pretty close to the node. Of course, once I'm there, I can just time accelerate down until I reach my maneuver window. The maneuver I have scheduled. So, yep, bit of a glitch there. We've got to make sure we turn off these rotation thrusters. We've been using these to, of course, spin up the rotating section of the spacecraft. We have the struts enabled. We have it anchored in place. And so we'll be ready for our burn. We don't want to have that thing spinning while we're burning. It just takes a lot of energy or whatever. Or it takes away the ability to control it, partly because the bearing isn't strong enough, and partly because, well, it's a spinning mass attached to a non-spinning mass, and bad things happen. You see these spacecraft like the Omega class destroyers in Babylon 5, and they have these rotating midsections. The engineering to do such a thing is non-trivial, especially when you consider you have to be able to turn the spacecraft and everything as well, and you have to compensate for mass being different on both sides. That can become a big problem. So yeah, I imagine these the Agamemnon, right? The rotating section in Babylon 5. I bet you it shifts slightly its center of mass to as people go from one section to another. If it becomes off balance, that would cause the entire ship to wobble, which would probably not be the best thing for long-term stress, things like that. The original Omega class designs, I believe, had the Star Furies supposed to drop out of the bottom of the rotating section, but the art guys actually had them coming out of the front, and that's how they ended up working in the TV series ultimately. So that was probably a better bet, because docking Star Furies or putting Star Furies down there would of course have all sorts of interesting center of mass issues. Anyway, yes, there is a lot of really long burns in this episode, because pretty much all it is more interplanetary maneuvering, but we do actually get to where we're going. Anyway, here we go, we're about there. Okay, so that brings us down to an 84 kilometer periaps, 84 kilometer perikey above the planet Kerbin, and that will of course be perfect for plotting ourselves an orbit to go all the way out to Jool. And this is we set target on that, and you can see eventually that it's going to take it doesn't take a huge amount once you get down there, because you have the bonus. It's only going to take about 1100 meters per second here, because we've already picked up a lot of energy by getting all the way out to Minmus, and then we can reclaim that energy by doing this low pass over Kerbin. Anyway, the problem I guess at this point is that we're actually too early in the orbit. I did set up a window for an escape window for this, and we're going to wait for that. So this is going to fly past Kerbin a couple of times, no doubt, waving at the command mod, waving at the command center back home that have called them persona non grata, let's say. But given that it would take a serious amount of energy to actually catch up with it, I think they're going to be fine. I think honestly the guys at Kerbal Space Center want them to succeed. Anyway, yeah, finally we have a bunch of space probes. Not saying finally, no, we have a bunch of space probes we need to fix their orbit. This first one is actually flying past Moho. Now, unfortunately, due to timing problems, it's gonna actually arrive at Moho after the Olympus ship, or Prometheus, right? So, and the Prometheus ship doesn't actually have any Kethane sensors on board, so they're going to have to wait for this to arrive. So it better make sure it does this maneuver correctly. Look at this is a 2.4 kilometer per second maneuver, or 2. It's a lot. It's hard to read these numbers on the post-production display. Can you believe? Yeah, this is where it's great to have mechanical jab working for you, because you can literally set your ion probe to fire for an hour and a half and then go away and come back, have a cup, go have a cup of tea or a beer or, all sorts of other things. Go and play another game even. Then come back and it's finished. It is actually good that you can play I can play multiple games on this machine and not worry about the recording. So anyway, look, we're zipping around the planet Kerbin once more. Let us appreciate there. Look, we have to fly around the dark side, of course, because that is going to be the ejection vector for escaping towards Jool. But no, and of course we can't have that center section rotating while during time acceleration. That would be pretty cool if we could, although given that we're time accelerating, it would be a veritable blur, spinning around like some ridiculous whirling dervish of spacecraftness. Okay, and so I'm continuing to follow it. We still don't have it. We have another space probe we need to make adjustments for. This one is supposed to be going to Eve and its moon Gilly, and this of course requires more manipulation and more maneuver node manipulation to get it going, and of course another ridiculously long burn to make it happen. There we go, just like point the engines there, go away, have a cup of tea, watch a movie, and then eventually this thing will come. Eventually when I come back, the thing will have aligned its planes. There we go. And so we aligned the planes, but we didn't quite get the orbits exactly, and that looks good. That's going to be a small burn here. It's only 19 meters, well, 19 minutes. Oh, only 20 minutes to do this. Of course, these at least you can do time acceleration, 4 times time acceleration on, and you'll get away with it. Just be glad we're not dealing with solar sails. And solar sails, I've noticed a number of people seem to think that solar sails use solar wind. Now, you could use solar wind, but solar wind is actually about 500 times weaker than the radiation pressure, simple pressure of light coming off the sun. So you want to use the light pressure, and for that you have a reflective surface that reflects photons back. Now, some things do move with the solar wind. If you have an ionized particle, say something has come off a comet and has been ionized by ultraviolet radiation, then because it has a charge, then its cross-section with respect to the solar wind, which is also charged, is much, much bigger, and that makes a huge difference. So the solar wind becomes dominant in that case. But if you have something that's uncharged, large and uncharged, like a solar sail, then you'll be sailing using photon pressure instead. And that'll be able to get you almost anywhere in the solar system. It just won't be able to get you there quickly. And of course, steering these things is also a problem. I believe the one sail that they tested, to steer it, they had panels that were essentially liquid crystal displays, but they weren't actually displaying anything. What they were doing, they would go black, and that would change the reflectivity, and then they would go clear, and that would give them a different reflectivity. And that meant that would produce a slight difference in the force across the surface of the sail, so they could rotate it very slowly. The whole thing would also be spinning as well to keep it stabilized. They would spin it and it would have weights on the end. Anyway, I think we're finally set up for our Jool maneuver here. So start out, aim it, and see how close we get. Of course, we're going to be slightly out of the plane here. We're about as far away from the node as is possible right now. And I'm just going to plug numbers into the maneuver node editor and get myself a reasonable encounter. So we're up about 1300 meters per second, and by adjusting the time, I can cut that down a little. by shifting the time back and forth, you see I can save the energy, I can save the amount of delta V I need. Unfortunately, because this spacecraft is rather slow to accelerate, I will end up using more than that estimate from the maneuver node, but that's just the nature of things. Also, note the wobbling, and as it wobbles, you see that the delta V on the right, is going up and down, like it's going to 1100 and then it's going to 1700. What I think is happening here is because we are only moving at 84 meters per second, the wobbling is actually affecting the orbit calculations because they're calculating the orbit relative to the command pod. And so even a small motion of a fraction of a meter per second is changing the periaps by a huge amount. And that means the maneuver node estimate is varying by a huge amount. So although it says 1500, that may not actually be correct. Looks like I've passed through periaps completely, and it says I'm going to need a 4-minute burn. So I'm going to trust this, get myself a little closer, flying around the night side here, everything locked in place, power up the nuclear reactors, and then it decides to tell me that it's a 17-minute burn. Why? What happened? What is it with these rockets that they have more thrust at the 1%? Okay. I don't know what happened there. So now I'm really screwed because it means I'm going to have to use way more fuel than I expected. I might have to actually do a serious course correction so I actually hit where I'm going. And of course this is going to be another one of those really long burns. And this one I can't do with mech jab. I pretty much have to hold attitude manually, or I risk the whole thing falling apart, basically. Rapid unplanned disassembly and all that. Not so rapid, it'll tend to be just losing control and then snapping in two, and then I'll have to conduct some sort of rescue operation, which may actually take less time than the whole mission to Jool, but that's what we want to see. Wow, look at that thing wobbling like an insanely wobbly kind of jelly thing in space. Quantum struts or not, the vehicle does want to flex a lot. So one of the things I realised is that I'm actually needing to burn a little closer to the horizon, so I end up bringing my thrust vector down closer to the horizon so that I flatten out my trajectory and bring myself more towards what I originally intended. And hopefully that will make up and we will still encounter Jool later on, but it's also hopefully it won't require a huge amount of extra fuel to do so. But yeah, it's just literally a slow process leaving Kerbin's sphere of influence, picking up the speed to get out there, and hoping that the thing doesn't fall apart. As I pick up speed, it becomes a lot easier, or rather as I dump mass, it becomes a lot easier to control, but it is literally a 30-minute burn during which I am stuck manually controlling it. One of the worst things I've had to do is seriously. And there we go, we're pretty close. You can see the nodes there, and it flickers, but yes, if I adjust it, I can in fact get my encounter with Jool. So I set up my maneuver node, and we are now set up for interplanetary cruise configuration. Artificial gravity system is running, solar panels are deployed, and we are on our way. And the other crew which was on our way, well, they are now getting ready to slow down at Moho. And to do this is going to be a lot of fuel, right? This is going to be almost all the delta V. You can just about see there, Moho. It's there, right? It's between me and the sun. Coming in above, and well, unfortunately, I never really got that mid-course correction, so we're going to come in, slow down, and put myself into an elliptical orbit that passes just above the planet's surface. And you'll see that the actual burn time is something like 20 minutes, so I pretty much have to start burning right away, otherwise I'm going to end up flying past the planet and leaving the sphere of influence, and that would not be happy. Ah, yeah, nice, more wobbling there, great. It does actually, as soon as I turn off the autopilot, it kind of settles down a little, but really, again, this is another slow burn without any
without MechJet being so useful. As it turns out, because if you look at the thing, I'm really close to the limit in my delta V here. So what I start doing is I'll turn on the RCS and start burning that as well. Partly to dump the extra mass of that fuel, and also partly to get a little extra thrust. But because the RCS has a much lower specific impulse, you want to dump that early. You want to dump that before you're, as soon as possible, so that you're pushing less mass and you're getting most efficient thing. I mean, this is a thing you'll see in space designs and the designs in Kerbal Space Program, is that you'll use things like the solid rocket boosters first because they have a lower specific impulse, and then once you get into space, the higher specific impulse, lower thrust becomes much more viable. But yeah, long burn here, and of course we still have this refuel issue where I have to manually refuel each of these tanks. Somebody said, oh, why don't you do this while the thrust is going? The obvious point here is if the thrust was still going while I was doing this fuel transfer, there would be asymmetric masses, and the thing would obviously want to turn, and given that it's articulated, that would probably lead to the thing breaking up or at least becoming uncontrollable. Anyway, moving on, I just basically turn off the maneuver node icon and manually thrust until I watch my periaps go down. You see the periaps is now 21 kilometers, and that is me. I've made my Moho insertion. I transfer every single drop of fuel I have left into this lander, and you'll see that the total delta V is 614 meters per second, which is rather small. In fact, it's probably too small to make a landing on Moho in orbit. However, as I get in close here, we get in nice and low. You see, I'm in orbit. It's about 900 meters per second in orbit. So I don't have, in fact, no, it's over 1,000, over 1,000 meters per second in orbit, right? And I have 614 in the tank. So how am I going to land? Well, thing is, there's actually two spacecraft here, and the lander, when I dump it, actually has lower mass, so I'm going to get 1334 meters per second. And that's barely enough for a landing. Now we need to figure out where to land, but that will be in the next episode. Until then, fly safe.